Paragone means comparing, competing, and it's really important in terms of the mindset of artists in the High Renaissance and their patrons, because both artists and patrons were deeply engaged in the idea that you would debate who is better, which artist is better. So the artists are stimulating each other to higher achievement that way. The patrons are driving their artists and driving their commissions to see that they're surpassing what has gone before or surpassing what another has done. So that's closely related to the idea of emulation. In the High Renaissance, an artist learns in the workshop of another artist. Leonardo learned in Verrocchio's workshop. Artists emulate what other artists do. That does not mean just imitation, though. It means that they're absorbing it, making their own, and trying to surpass it. They have a competitive quality to their learning from others, even as they appreciate what others have done. So when Michelangelo carves his David, Leonardo actually goes and makes a drawing study, thinking about what Michelangelo did. But Leonardo doesn't need to just copy Michelangelo. He's Leonardo, and he isn't interested in that. He's interested in rethinking the model of Michelangelo in a way that emulates it, but adds Leonardo's own distinctive twist to it. And so when Raphael does the same thing and studies Michelangelo's sculpture, he thinks about it from this view, this kind of twisted view from behind, rather than the frontal view that we so often see in photographs. So a spirit of rivalry, friendly rivalry, but competitive rivalry, is driving High Renaissance achievement. And it actually has its moments of being kind of amusing. So we actually have a piece of writing from Leonardo da Vinci when he himself is talking about the Paragone. So the Paragone means the comparison between painting and sculpture, which is the best. So you could compare individual artists and say, which artist seems to be the best? That could be a kind of friendly debate that a patron or a humanist might have. But the most famous Paragone was for the humanists, the artists, the patrons, to talk about whether sculpture was better than painting, I meant to say, or vice versa. So Leonardo got in on the debate about painting versus sculpture, and you will not be surprised to find that Leonardo argues that painting is better, but it's not just about which one he thinks is better. Listen to his reasoning. It's very revealing. He says, the only difference I find between painting and sculpture is that the sculptor conducts his works with greater manual effort, hand labor. Sculpture, he says, is really about the manual laborer. You can prove that this is true because when the sculptor makes his work, he consumes the marble by effort of his arm and by percussion, which is a highly mechanical exercise, often accompanied by great amounts of sweat composed of dust and converted into mud. So he's saying that, sculptors are basically just physical laborers. They just hammer away at that marble. They get sweaty. They get all dusty, and then the sweat and the dust makes them muddy and dirty. And, with his face all coated and dusty with marble dust, he just looks like a baker. He's not very high status, is he? This is actually not about the innate properties of sculpture. Once again, it's about the status of the artist and the idea of whether artists are becoming like intellectuals. So this is totally hilarious because he says that, the sculptor, Michelangelo, he's covered with minute flakes so that he seems to have been covered with snow, and his house is filthy and full of chips and stone dust. Just the opposite happens to the painter. Speaking of excellent sculptors and painters, this wouldn't apply in Leonardo's mind to the lesser artists. The painter sits in front of his work at great ease, well-dressed, and wielding the lightest brush with charming colors. His clothing is ornamented according to his pleasure, and his house is filled with charming paintings and clean. And he is often accompanied by music. A painter, he is saying, is more like an aristocrat, is more like his patrons, the Medici, and not like the baker or the person doing the bricklaying. So this is very much about class and status.